Welcome back to another Sika Q&A. Today's question is from Rogue Brogue. Any cues you'd recommend for a secure jerk lockout? I've been having issues where I'll put a lot of power into the drive out of the dip, but as a result, I'll pull the bar down and it causes my left elbow to bend when I catch it. So I think generally to start off with, people oftentimes look for technical changes in their jerk or different things they should do with their technique to kind of change the way they're trying to move the bar or change the way they're approaching the dip and drive or the split. When we look at nations that have incredibly good jerks, right? So notably the Russians, many of the Eastern European bloc countries have very, very strong dips, and they also have incredibly strong pressing power and very strong push press power. So for both of these auxiliary lifts or additions to their training, they clearly give it a lot of thought. Like if you look at some of the best split jerks in the world, like notably Gabriel, incredibly strong strict press and an incredibly strong push press, and they train them frequently. So they don't just kind of leave that power or leave that strength go after they've built it to a certain level. They're constantly bringing it in either through complex work or through just sole strict pressing or sole strict pressing after the session. So a lot of it, when it comes down to having a better or a stronger or a faster or a more solid lockout in the jerk, a lot of it comes down to the actual strength you put into that elbow lockout. I think there's other advantages as well to people having large pressing strength. So when we get to the point whereby you're either locking it out or you're having a soft lockout, like you're saying here on your left elbow, it could be due to the fact that that bar is slightly out in front of you or slightly back behind you a bit too much. The advantage of you being extra strong or having that extra strength overhead is that you're going to have more margin for error. So in the classic case of people miss more squat jerks than they do split jerks. So in the classic case of like squat jerk versus split jerk, where 90% of squat jerks at competition get missed and not 90% of split jerks get missed, a lot of that comes down to the split jerk having a much higher margin for error, a much larger margin for error with where the bar goes overhead. The other thing that will help, besides having a larger margin for error, is just having larger strength over a bigger range. So if I'm able to hold 100 kilos directly over the crown of my head, I might only be able to hold 90 kilos 5 centimeters in front of that and 5 centimeters behind that. Obviously, the more you bring up the kind of entirety of your overhead strength, that might be 95 kilos when it's 5 centimeters out in front, or 95 when it's 5 centimeters back behind.
One of those comments on the pressing ability of lifters. Sometimes it's seen as a badge of honor among some of the better lifters. They'll say something, and I can think of two off the top of my head, like Luz Arjun and Tarokudi. Both recently have said stuff like, I can only press like 90 kilos. I wasn't that good at pressing, but I could still jerk 240. As if, I don't know why, but it seemed like a badge of honor that you neglected your press to jerk more. Like it didn't stop them. It wasn't going to make their jerk worse by pressing more. And obviously, not throwing shade at anyone, but both of those jerks are inconsistent somewhat, so maybe you could make some observations there, but people will attack me in the comments now for being like, you didn't jerk 240.
Yeah, but they're incredibly inconsistent.
But so like it's you shouldn't take that as, like I think Lou even mentioned that thing. He said, jerking is not pressing, but then it's like saying cleaning isn't squatting, so why would you do that? So it doesn't hold up that kind of train of thought. So it makes sense to train your press. One of, like Lockout, for example, phenomenal split jerk, 250 or more, probably 260 or plus from rack.
The story of Lockout was when he broke his shoulder.
Yeah.
It was attempting a 275 kilo split jerk from rack for the second time that day. So obviously a very strong split jerk.
So, Dimitri Brestov is a great split jerk. Artyom Okanov is an unbelievable split jerk. He's like one of the best ones, and we've seen him press at least 120. There's other lifters like Belarusians, Peter Asanoyak, I think. I remember we talked about him on the weightlifting commentaries. He did phenomenal split jerk, and he was push pressing something like 170 plus. Gabriel is like a 170 push press. So you can have a good jerk without having good press, but having good press doesn't mean you're going to have a bad jerk, and it more than likely will make you have a better jerk. So in that regards, start thinking about your jerk. We talked to Yasmin last week. The Romanian coach told her she needs to start pressing every day and hugely bring up her strict press. So you need to bring it in proportion is probably the main thing with your strict press, as opposed to, no one's telling you strict press 150 kilos and only be jerking 160. Like, that's not what's going to happen, and that's obviously not what you're going to be able to do. It's not going to restrict you adding 20 kilos to your strict press. If you can't even press body weight, there's probably an issue there. Moving off the subject of attacking people over their strict press and jerk ratios, moving back on to the subject of the question, some of the things you can do, there's some great assistance exercises, and there's two off the top of my head that have helped me an awful lot. One is single arm overhead kettlebell walks, and it has improved my overhead position hugely in the last kind of 4 or 5 months. I do them every morning with a kettlebell, 15 kilos, and it has made a huge difference in my jerk lockout and the mobility regards that. The other one that you can do, and I did it for a period of time and it definitely helped, was just handstand holds. The one issue with handstand holds is you can fatigue a lot of kind of the tendons and ligaments and so your mid traps, some of them around your elbows if you do it too frequently. So it's something you need to be careful of, and it can be a little bit fatiguing, but once a week or so can definitely help with your jerk. One of the things I always compliment CrossFitters on, a lot of the elite CrossFitters, while they don't have great jerk technique, their actual lockout on the jerks and snatches are always phenomenal. They always have a great position because they're great at forcing and maintaining a very nice position overhead. So single arm overhead walks plus handstand holds are phenomenal for the actual position of your jerk.
Yeah, so moving on from that, strength, then the actual forcing it and that muscular cue. The next thing then is your timing. So rather than the strength of actually driving that bar overhead, more the kind of motor pattern or the motor schema of you driving with the legs, the bar releasing off your chest or your shoulders, then you starting to drive with your triceps and lock your elbows out. A lot of the time we see lifters kind of in that intermediate phase, maybe been training 2 to 5 years, and when they start getting that kind of elbow pop or that kind of softer elbow in the lockout, a lot of the time it's a direct issue with timing. So they start to drive up and it might be too late or it might be too early they're engaging their arms. But either way, when that bar is reaching the peak of its, so if you imagine the bar drives all the way up, once it reaches a certain point it starts to come back down, you want to be locking it out at the peak of that curve. So when the bar gets there, you need to make sure that elbow is fully locked out. The best way, I think, besides doing loads of jerks from rack, loads of clean and jerks, the best way outside of all that, which will be a kind of very, very heavy training load, will be if you are waiting for the kettle to boil in your kitchen or waiting for pasta to cook or waiting outside the toilet in your office, you should be doing split jerks. So stand there. It doesn't matter that you look like a freak. Everyone thinks you're a freak anyway because you're so obsessed with weightlifting. Stand there, just nothing in your hands, dip, drive, do your split jerk. Start visualizing that. Start making it into a both physical and mental exercise. And it should just become a thing that when you're imagining the jerk in your own head, you can already see dip, drive, pop. And when that front foot is hitting the floor and that bar is hitting the top of its curve, your elbows are fully locked out already. Those kind of small cueing exercises or small bits of mental and physical practice are going to make a huge difference while adding absolutely nothing to your training load. You could literally do 50 reps 5 times a day and it will make no difference to how fatigued you are. But I guarantee you, if you do 50 reps 5 times a day for 3 weeks, you're going to have a much, much better jerk, and that will stay with you for a long time.
Probably the last thing then would be maybe kind of in 2 parts. First, we come to mobility. So you mentioned that one side locks out less well than the other side. So there's probably a good chance to do some mobility issues. A lot of times you see people with shitty lockouts. It's not so much that they don't have the strength to hold the weights they're doing, but oftentimes it's because they don't have the mobility to maintain a good position in the lockout. So you definitely need to look at thoracic, tricep, shoulders, mid-back, upper back, so any number of these issues, you need to look at those and address those to improve your jerk lockout. So you might not be able to hold those positions at any kind of weight, even the barbell, let alone with heavier weights. Then finally, probably the last thing is you just need to sometimes force that lockout. It doesn't happen with naturally. It doesn't happen. Weightlifting's not supposed to be comfortable. It's not supposed to feel very easy. It should be under pressure. You should feel like you're under pressure. You should be working to do things. And a lot of times people just don't force the jerk lockout. Now, there is some issues with an incredibly heavy oscillating barbell and slam your elbows, which are one of the criticisms of the press rule. But in general, most people are too far away from that spectrum. So if you imagine the spectrum over here where it's like really light female lifters with low stability, very, very heavy barbells, and they're slamming their elbows, as opposed to amateur 77.6 kilo weightlifting enthusiasts with poor mobility jerking 80 kilos and their body weight's whatever I said it was. You don't have to worry about that so much. You just need to focus on attaining the proper positions, like you would attaining any other position in the snatch or the clean. So too should you focus on attaining the best position in the jerk and following through at the end of the jerk. I think everyone kind of has that problem. Obviously, be careful. If it causes pain, don't do it, and figure out why. But ultimately, you need to try and attain the position that you're trying to get to. Thanks for watching, guys.
If you want to put some of this stuff into practice, if you want to get a really kind of well-informed weightlifting program and you're just starting off, we have a 12-week beginner weightlifting program. Gives you 4 sessions a week. There's loads of progressions in there. You get access to the coaching group, which will be live streams twice a week. Any questions you have will be answered. We've already got people making huge PBs, and we've had a lot of people run the program. If you want details on that, click the link below and it'll bring you to sikastan.com. Thank you.
Thank you.